I need to tell you, though, as we are starting the show tonight, one of the things that we are keeping an eye on is something that I think will have to change over the course of this evening. If it doesn't change during our exact hour when we are live on the air, I imagine it will have to change at least overnight, just because it seems absolutely untenable what the president is apparently planning to do here. This mass killing at the Pittsburgh synagogue on Saturday was the worst and deadliest attack on American Jews in the history of our country. And anti-Semitic incidents, anti-Semitic rhetoric and vandalism and attacks, they have generally been on the rise over the past couple of years, particularly with the newly emboldened white nationalist groups that we are now coping with as a country. When the president went out of his way last year to say nice things about the gentleman who showed up to rally by torchlight at Charlottesville, Virginia in the Unite the Right rally last year, one of the reasons people were so shocked by that commentary from the president was, yeah, because those guys had just killed someone at that rally, but also because they had staged a torchlit march where they marched around literally shouting in unison, "Jews will not replace us." The president has still never retracted his statement that there were, good people among the "Jews will not replace us" crowd in Charlottesville, Virginia. So the climate is bad and getting worse. The Anti-Defamation League tracks anti-Semitic incidents in the United States every year. They say the number of such incidents rose 57% last year over the previous year. Right, so things are already just not going in a good direction. But what happened this weekend, what happened Saturday in Pittsburgh, is obviously something different by an order of magnitude, right? What happened Saturday in Pittsburgh, this mass murder by a guy who police say literally just told them he was out to kill as many Jews as possible. What happened Saturday really has never, ever happened before in the history of the United States. American Jews have never been attacked like this, have never suffered something like this in this country. And that's why I think even a lot of people who are jaded and cynical by now and well-trained not to expect any better were still nevertheless surprised when the president decided that on Saturday night, just hours after the massacre, he would go ahead with his planned political rally in Illinois. Yeah, why cancel it just because we just had the worst and most murderous anti-Semitic attack in the history of the United States of America? The president still wanted to do his rally. Why would he not? And so he did it, and he explained to his rally audience on Saturday night that he thought about canceling the event, but he decided not to, because he explained to the crowd that right after 9/11, the New York Stock Exchange had opened up the very next day after the 9/11 attack. So that was the principle he was following with doing his political rally the night of the worst massacre of American Jews ever. Now, whatever you think of that argument from the president, the 9/11 argument, right? It may surprise you or not to learn that, in fact, the New York Stock Exchange didn't open up on the day after 9/11. It didn't. It stayed closed for days. So even the thing he's using to justify what he did on Saturday is the president didn't want a massacre of American Jews to stop his rally. He really loves these rallies. And so here, he came up with a fairy tale about something that really, truly did not happen at 9/11. He threw that out there as the reason he was still doing his rally. Now, if you think it was an honest mistake by the president and he must have felt badly about it, you should also know that by later on Saturday night, the president was busy tweeting about the World Series and criticizing the coaching staff of the LA Dodgers. And I point that out only to show and to say that there is, just as in terms of like knowing what comes next, this is a turbulent time, right? This is a dark time. This is a time when people start crying listening to the news on the radio, right? Like, what new terrible thing is going to happen? This is a time when people are like checking out of the news because it just seems like one more terrible thing can't possibly be larded on top of the other stuff that we've been coping with. In that context, it is both psychologically helpful and helpful for us as a civic society that we have some expectation of what can come next, of what will come next, about what's the reasonable sort of number line between which we might have a reasonable expectation of what's going to happen next in our country, right? Like a little stability, right? A little foresight, a little reasonable expectation. Because I think we need that, I think it's important to recognize that there's no reason for us to expect any big outbreak of leadership here, right, from the president. Not after an event like this, not with a president like this. I don't say that with malice toward the president at all. I say it just because we should be clear about the facts. That to the extent that we as a country need leadership at a time like this, we need leadership after an unprecedented attack like this, which comes as the end of hopefully the end of a series of attacks. To the extent that we need leadership at a time like this as a country, we are not going to get it from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And therefore, we will need to find it elsewhere. But that's okay, right? Just be reasonable about where leadership is going to come from. It's not coming from there. That's okay. To the extent that eloquence and insight and empathy and justice are things that the country needs right now, those things will rise up. Those things will be made manifest. The dearth of those things coming from the political leadership, the dearth of those things coming from the White House will take the form of a vacuum that other leaders and other more capable Americans will fill. I absolutely believe it. But the president being that vacuum, being that sort of sucking hole in the middle of this story and this national trauma. Here's the thing about that seems to me can't stand even for the duration of this evening, even for just Monday night. You might have seen news coverage today, including the front page of the Washington Post, about this open letter that was written by Jewish leaders in the city of Pittsburgh after Saturday's mass murder. It's an open letter, and these Jewish leaders in Pittsburgh invited other people to sign on to what they had said. I checked a little bit before coming into the studio, and last I looked, nearly 50,000 people had signed on to this letter as of tonight. The letter isn't long. It's directly about the synagogue massacre, and it calls on President Trump to please not come to Pittsburgh in the immediate wake of this event. Well, naturally, that made this president want to go to Pittsburgh all the more, and the sooner the better. I mean, this open letter was posted, Jewish leaders voicing their preference about a presidential visit. The White House responded by deciding to stick a thumb in their eye and immediately schedule a presidential visit for Pittsburgh for tomorrow. Well, now here's the real problem with that. The funerals. Pittsburgh is going to start burying their dead tomorrow. The first of the funerals for those who were killed in this attack will start tomorrow. And that has practical consequences. And that led the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh to make this public, sort of humble plea. He told reporters today, quote, "We do not have enough public safety officials to provide enough protection at the funerals and to be able at the same time to draw attention to a potential presidential visit. If the president is looking to come to Pittsburgh, I would ask that he not do so while we are burying the dead." As of right now, though, apparently the president's still planning on going. So imagine you work at the White House. Right? You're used to a lot from this president, but right now, in this moment, what are you telling yourself about what you're helping plan and working on at the White House, right? The White House justification for this is what? Oh, that's cute. Your massacre victims need burying? No, President Trump wants to do what he wants to do. That's more important. I mean, the city is literally saying, as a matter of public safety, which you would think would be paramount at this time, they cannot devote enough resources to both protect the funerals of the massacre victims and also bring the president into the city where he'd like to show up despite all the requests from that city to the contrary. So, like I said, we're watching this sort of small element of this story tonight because it just seems like this just seems like a thing that cannot stand, right? I mean, the president continuing to hold his political rally and tweeting about baseball within hours of the worst attack in the history of the United States on Jewish Americans. You know, maybe that was stuff he just decided to do on his own. But the president now deliberately interfering with the funerals of the murder victims? Presumably that has to be like a whole of White House effort, right? He can't plan that himself. And so presumably somebody in the White House will be too nauseous to go through with that, right? Right? We await word. I fully expect, because I am a glass half full kind of person, that we will hear that the president is going to delay that trip. But as of yet, it's still on.